Finance from ABSA, going off the beaten track to find solutions. Finance from ABSA, overcoming all obstacles.
Botswana is known as one of the most peaceful nations on the African continent, but for 3 days in June, this peace and quiet is shattered by more than 80 cars, which pierces the air with loud noise and speed along desert paths at breakneck pace. It's the Toyota Kalahari Botswana Desert 1,000-kilometer race, leg 4 of the 07 ABSA Off-Road Championship Series, marking the halfway point of the Nationals, all of the categories which were balanced on a knife edge. The route was divided up into a prologue on day 1 over 50 kilometers to determine starting positions for the racing proper on day 2 and 3, when the 75 teams of production and special vehicles hit the circular route that was designed with the Botswana Tourism Board and the local ecology in mind. Former national champions Duncan Foss and his stand-in co-driver and 7-time desert champion Richard Leek in their proudly South African Nissan Navara looked sharp as they sped by early on, seeking a second win in a row after his triumph at Sun City 5 weeks earlier. With another Nissan Corvette and Balzar's Navara closing the gap to the front, things were going to get interesting. And when Corbett gets the bit between his teeth, you have to stand back. For Harkis and Moore, there was an even bigger move. They were 17th overnight, but moved straight into the top 10, even though they wrong slotted here. At the front of the specials, though, the biggest surprise of the day was delivered by Kali Silvot and his son Quinton, who piloted their transport Zarko out to a lead of almost 3 minutes over the next special. In between that, though, there was Visser and Badenhorst in their Castrol Toyota, who was steady after starting off 10th. The second special was the turquoise blue Atlas Copco bat of the Harpers, whose cautious approach in the first half was paying off in the second. Matthews and Smith had suffered a puncture 32 kilometers out from the finish line on day 1 and had to be content with third. While the driver the latter part of the day came from Motorrad team manager Hutchison and Bergman. They were 20th in class but passed all in sundry to take 4th. And looking and sounding rather worse for wear after several collisions with Botswana's finest fauna and flora, Bevan Bertolt and Robin Houghton came through, and Total Motorsports' Variawa and Rousseau got things going again after a puncture robbed them of some time. For Bertolt and Costain in the Atlas Copco Porter, their race had been run. Gibson and Brown, though, streaked by, and they were putting together a good first day, albeit too far back to worry their special pace setters. The Rapsabat of Nandis Alberts and Colin Hunter had lost a few places but was still in the top 10 in class. Marsh and Krinovot certainly gave the crowd at the bridge the royal treatment on the flyby. But it was Herman Silwell who impressed everyone with his fine driving and aggressive lines. Back at the bridge, Schilling also gave the crowd what they come to see, all-out speed. The Cries looked like they were again set to dominate Class B, and who could argue, 3 for 3 and going well. The dust in the last few Ks was extremely punishing, and the specials felt it the worst. Just ask Oregon's David and Gary White. Woolridge and Scholthammer have not had the best of seasons. The defending SB champions hadn't finished the first 2 races, but they opened their account at Sun City. Here they again struggled. But in contrast, their stablemates Van Tonda and Guapa and the Unifreight Ford Ranger gave a good account of themselves. Blind in one eye and with body parts all over the show, Tollefson and Quinn showed proof that the African bush is one harsh place. While a whole procession of production cars lined up for the finish after day 1, ahead of the specials. Zamatin nursed his Nissan through, while the Rokon lads just rushed on by. The side note and the brain was solid in the Adenko Bat in Class B. While the Weichholtz brought the Toyota home looking very well considering the terrain they'd had to cover. In Class E, Jack Peckham and Lucio Santoro led the championship race by a slender point, and they made sure the opposition knew it. But Toyota's Malcolm Cock and Wayne Brink were keeping them honest. And Brian Martin and Oki Free were just close enough to not let the Ford pair relax. The Barlow World Absolute Ford Ranger of Schroeder and Huxtable was plagued by several small problems, but they too were heading for the finish line after a long 480-odd Ks. However, at the finish line of day one, it was the almost unrecognizable Toyota father and son combination Hichu and Jaap de Bruin who won in 7 hours and 57 minutes. They were just 17 seconds ahead of a charging Grobler and Jordan in the Nissan Navara, who were chasing hard at the end. For Alfie Cox, it was the end of a dream to win in a production car, on 2 wheels and in a special. And an unfancy team, the Silwalds, led the special vehicle category home with another father and son combination, the Harpers, hoping to make the Sunday a fine Father's Day for one family with a victory. On day 2, the De Bruins had a lot of hard thinking, strategizing and driving to do. They'd never won a major race such as this on the off-road calendar before, therefore they were in uncharted waters. The McLaren Excel dealer team Toyota screamed away from the line. As for Grobler and his longtime navigator Francois Jordan, they were ready to do the business. Mark Corbett and Rudy Balzar's Nissan made it 3 versus 2 in the Japanese manufacturer's battle up front. The Silwalds were through next, and despite an electrical niggle, they were very impressive on a route which never really allowed the specials to let it all hang out, but they were leading by a good 60 seconds. Twice winners last season, the Harpers were slowly edging their way closer and had made their way past 1 or 2 of the production cars. Nick is a cagey old fox at the best of times. While Visser and Badenhorst are also 2 wily campaigners who know their way around the African bush. It showed. And third spot in the specials was still firmly in the grasp of Variawa and Rousseau, who were 6 odd minutes behind the Harpers. The Motorrad team lost Cox early on day 2, but team manager Hutchison kept the black and silver flag flying. They were just more than 10 minutes behind Cully Sewalt, but kept Variawa honest all the way, while Harkus just piled on the speed and the skill to slip into 4th in the SP class with the Ford Ranger. The absolute bat of Clint Gibson and Mike Brown was up into 5th place after a smooth start. Keep in mind that they were 23rd overall and 12th in class after the Prologue. With the Ford of the defending SP class champions, Woolridge and Schulthammer carving their way up the field to get into 5th place in the production car class. A fine run, even though he almost collected that gate post. Marsh and Groenewald got the Regent Insurance lads and lasses smiling with a good performance, but that pesky post could have been the end of the road. They were up into 6th. But in Class B, there were no surprises. The Cries, Jan and Hendrik, made it a fine Father's Day when they recorded their 4th win in as many races in 07. They're unstoppable. Cronje and Birken ground to a halt, but when Berthold hit the same stump as they did, they stole some parts off the Hilux and limped to the finish line in 7th place, a good recovery. Bez Verseidnout and Johan de Bruin were next in the specials. Veredenko backed in 11th place, but second in the B class, 26 minutes behind the Cries. With Louw de Bruin and Rudy Brits 3rd in class, just 63 seconds further back, pushing the Edenko boys all the way home. In 8th overall, it was the ever-improving Bloemfontein-based Roacon crew of George and Sharon Barkhuizen, who were 38th overall at the start of the race proper. A phenomenal performance. And Ford fans would have been very pleased to see Peckham leading the Nissan of Zermatten, but not for long, as the Rhobi man and his brother Maurice streaked by to take the lead in Class D. With Malcolm Koch and Wayne Brink in their Castrol Toyota in 2nd, 2 minutes further back, their teammate Brian Martin racing in Class E was in turn just 10 minutes down on Peckham. In Class S, it was one-way traffic as Richard Schilling wrapped things up and only had to keep it on the road and complete to win. At the line, though, it was Duncan Voss and Richard Leek who piloted the proudly South African Nissan Navara home in 14 hours and 53 minutes after driving within themselves, yet with enough speed not to have to let the lead get too far away. Nissan made it 2 for 2 as Corbett and Balzar brought their Navara home just 6 minutes down. Then it was the turn of Cully and Quinton Silwald, who enjoyed Father's Day in a great way, a winning way. The Silwalds had started off 15th overall and 9th in class, and it certainly was one of the best performances of the ABSA Off-Road Series in 07. It took all sorts of ways to get there, but eventually they all did, even if it was on 3 wheels, as Richard Schilling eventually did right at the end. At the top of the championship log at the halfway mark of the ABSA Off-Road Series, it's Vos who leads Grobler by 12 points with Cronje 27 down. The Buckhuizens have crept onto the top 10 page with yet another good showing in Class E. And the top 20 rounds out like that. The Harpers, who have exactly 10 points in hand over Hutchison and Bergman, while Varayawa and Rousseau will be ready to bounce, but right off Alfie Cox at your own peril. And the lead in Class B hotly contested, while it's Schilling and Davies all the way in Class S. Until next time, you keep it on the road, we'll keep it off-road.